The wounded will be brought in here by ambulance. 4 men to an ambulance. They are retrieved by an ambulance attendant who's expert in what he does, and stretcher bearers with a minimum of disruption to that soldier's injury, get him on the stretcher, get him over here. Now, before Letterman came, the ambulances were under control of the regimental quartermaster, whose primary supply mission in the Army is get the troops equipment, right? So he might or might not use the ambulances to remove wounded on the way back, but that was hardly his priority. Letterman seized all the ambulances the quartermaster corps, pissed them off completely. They're not yours anymore, they're ours. They could only be moved by the orders of the medical staff of the regiments. Each regiment, if they might have 2 to 4 ambulances, they'd bring the men here. We might have 150 men laid out here in the course of the afternoon after a battle in the evening. Now, let us shift our focus to Antietam, because that's what you gentlemen are interested in. Clara Barton comes upon the scene. She follows Hooker's army in the morning. She has 6 wagons completely provisioned, and she is really smart. What are you going to need on the battlefield? You're going to need the stuff the surgeons don't have. They're going to run out of bandages. They're going to run out of drugs. They're going to run out of daylight. Now, you had me move a lantern. That's the lantern by which we operate at night. We do a number of nighttime battlefield scenarios, okay? And they're very moving. They're very ethereal. The whole place will be lit with lanterns on here. She comes across the surgeon, hands down in the building. It's getting dark. He can't operate, and you just can't see. And he knows the men who he does not operate on until tomorrow will probably have a much poorer chance of living. She says, "Surgeon, go to the barn." She has installed 150 lanterns in the barn. The barn is full of light. He can operate all night. He is overjoyed. Now, most people who bring wine to the battlefield, alcohol was used as a stimulant. When we got Mark off the table, we might give him a drink or two. That kind of, we didn't know. It wasn't hardly a stimulant, was it, Mark? It was a relaxant. But we would give him a couple of shots of wine to kind of get him going, or a sugary beverage. And then he'd go off to the convalescent area of the camp. Now, and each of these amputations, you see, it's brutally efficient. It's 10 minutes. Why? Because all these men I don't get to today will have a much poorer chance of surviving till tomorrow. If I'm in good health when the battle breaks out, we'll be able to operate non-stop for about 36 hours before our bodies just crap out and we can't function anymore. Now, we will do each man, get him on the table. Now, it's very simple. How do I know? Where's Freddie's form? Doesn't matter. I'll look at that wound. In 10 seconds, I've made my mind up whether it can come or go. It's very simple. Penetrating wound, the bone is intact. Bullet just went through. This guy's going to get through his arm. If the bone is broken, it has to come off, because remember, 2,000 years of medical, surgical, military history have taught us he will die if it's left on. Now, we'll take that off very quickly. A major advance in the Civil War is the ability to ligate arterial bleeders. Okay? How many of you have been to Old Ironsides in the Boston Navy Yard?
I've been there.
Let's go down the surgical deck.
No, I didn't.
Next time you go down there. I've been there 3 times, so you can go a second time. You go down the surgical deck, they very thoughtfully painted it red. Pretty good plan. Now, how did naval sailors get wounded in time of battle? You put a 24-pound ball through 24 inches of oak at 1,000 yards, the wood of the ship becomes shrapnel. It's brutal. It's actually almost in a way worse than what these men get with metal. These men will be brought down to surgical deck. The same surgical rules apply there that apply in the Civil War. And they know this. They already know this. The Romans knew this, okay? Now, we don't have anesthesia in the American Revolution. The mark of a good surgeon is the man who can cut your arm or leg off in 1 minute flat. He will do a guillotine amputation right through everything. Why? Because you are awake for the entire event until you pass out. Now, how do they achieve cautery in the American Revolution? Next time you go, look for the big cast iron pot. It was filled and brought to a boil with boiling pine pitch. Why pine pitch? Because it's sticky. If you were still conscious, or if you weren't, they would take that pine paddle of pine pitch and put it on your stump and burn everything, and then take the tourniquet off. That's how they stopped bleeding. Why was that bad? Number 1, it was excruciatingly painful. Number 2, it damaged all the tissue at the end of the stump. Now, by the Civil War, 2 things have happened. We're doing flap amputations, which we were not able to demonstrate here today, and we can't in this setting. Why a flap? Because you can sew that, and if that's a leg, you're wearing a prosthetic leg in a month. Now, if it's an arm, you don't have, you do a guillotine, you got bone sticking out for a year. Now, the other big standard that went up, the ability to ligate arteries without burning them up. This was a huge step forward. Now, it's 1863. We can't transfuse blood. We can't give IV fluids. We cannot, we don't know about bacteria. But both armies had this organized system of triage. They've got their act together. What percentage of the Confederate soldiers who see the surgeon alive with a wound by 1863 to the end of the war go home alive? What percentage do you think?
Not very high.
I'd say 80%.
He cheated.
I heard that.
Yeah, he didn't cheat. He's educated.
Either that or he's been through
a number of
thing
years
before.
ago, I went to the American Museum of Civil War Medicine in Frederick, Maryland, 10, 12, 15 years ago. And I held the same contempt most modern 21st century Americans held for the Confederate and Union Army surgeons. I spent the entire day there with Mrs. Annabel. She was very patient. I left with a profound, newfound respect for what these boys had done and these women and men. 80% of the rebels went home alive after 63. 85% of the Yankees went home alive after 63. No IV fluids, no antibiotics, no knowledge of bacteriology, no ability to give blood. Because of battlefield triage, the system of care, prompt amputation, treatment of the wounds, and as the war went on, Fred, where's our IV? We didn't know how germs worked yet, but we did learn if you had a wound infection, called it laudable pus if it wasn't too bad. They all got infected. About 80% of them did well and healed up despite that. They would bathe it with iodine every day, or if it was bad, they'd bathe it with bromide, which would burn like hell. You'd have to put the patient to sleep to do this. But we began noticing the infections started getting better. Didn't know they were infected, but man, it made the difference. So the war had significant progress. This is the first time in medical history of the world that American medicine became respected. Before the war, if you wanted to get a medical education, first class, you went to Europe, not here. After the war, American medicine was recognized internationally. The whole specialty of neurology was founded in the Civil War. Harold, we need Harold. Harold the Head is one of the scenarios we do. And this cost us a young man yesterday, didn't he? He was standing right behind you. And he lasted till the blood clot.
There's our buddy Luke over there.
Yes, see this little soldier? I want to commend him to
Come
you.
here, Luke.
Come on over.
Come in here, buddy.
Luke laid on this table for 3 hours and let us crack his head open over and over and over.
Is that right?
Now,
Get in here, Luke.
this is a skull cap that goes on the soldier. And the typical scenario, what happened to the soldier? So, well, you've got a musket butt. And our muskets will crush your skull, my skull, just like an egg. He's brought in, he's having a convulsion. Very dramatic, the crowd sees that. Because you have to remember, and you guys will appreciate this, a lot of what we do here is theater, to make the point. He's seizing, he's unconscious. They say, well, what happened to this man? Well, he got his skull crushed in the musket butt, so what do I know? He's got a depressed skull fracture. What do I also know? If I don't do something, he's going to die. What are we going to do? I'm going to take one of my amputating knives, lay his scalp open. I am going to take a surgeon's trephine, hole saw.
Also,
I'm going to bore a hole through.
got the pressure.
Lenticular knife thread, hopefully in there somewhere. A lenticular knife is a wedge-shaped device. Well, it's somewhere. There's it. Back. There, I see it. This is a purpose neurosurgical instrument. Picture, if you will, it's a knife blade on one side, a wedge on the other. I will put it in, and it's got a smooth surface to protect the brain. I'll put it in and pull the skull fragment, the depressed fracture, back up to restore the normal shape of the skull. Once I've done that, there will be bleeding. This is where we lose people. These are pretty well dried out by now, and that's why I can't quite get a hold of them. I'll pull out, this will be dripping, and as I do so, I put it in these 3 fingers and crush it, and blood drizzles between my fingers on the table. The seizure stops. I step back, put my hands on my hips, and say, well, at least this young man now has a chance. And 5% of them went home alive and returned to function. No antibiotics, no nothing. American neurology came of age in the Civil War. I would have gone home after the war like my Confederate. Then my federal surgeon returns to my hometown and practices for another 30 years. He dies in 1910 in Cornell, New York. He rose to the occasion. He was very excellent, and before he left the Army, was appointed Surgeon-in-Chief of Birney's division, 3rd Corps of the Army. What would happen is, as war went on, they'd figure out which surgeons got the best results. We'd be here in a brigade or division hospital, 6 of us, and all these wounded would be brought into us because these are the guys that have the best chance of fixing this guy and getting him home. And Jamison was one of those people. Capers was Major Lagrange Capers, my Confederate character, and he was one of those people. And then they ended their service and went home and resumed their free service lives. The Confederate forces were fighting for their freedom from what they assumed was a nation that was invading them and attacking them. The Union was not saving to stop slavery, were they, Mark? They were fighting to save the Union. It's after the Battle of Antietam, Lincoln has made a pact with God. If God will give us a victory, I will issue. He'd written the Emancipation in July, but he couldn't issue it. They were getting their ass cleaned in battle. And he issued the proclamation the week after the Battle of Antietam. Antietam, which is one of my special areas, was a battle McClellan could have won 6 times and threw each of the opportunities away. Even on September 18th, the day after the battle, he sat in his ass. He outnumbered Bobby Lee 2-1. Could have pushed him right on the Potomac. Didn't have the ball sack to attack. He summed up General Lee. I am quite sure he will be weak of spirit when pressed by heavy responsibilities and will be irresolute in action. His description of General Lee is an exact and perfect description of himself. One of General Lee's subordinate officers who knew him best said, General Lee might as well be named General Audacious. He will take more risks faster and at higher percentages than any general in the history of human warfare. He was absolutely right.
And it paid off time
It paid
and
off
again.
time after time after time.
Time and again.
And the only reason you say, well, you know, Lee's battle plan, Order 191, was discovered. Get off his ass and whip him with it. And he said, if I can't whip Bobby Lee with this order, I'll go home. We didn't have the grace to do that. Lincoln had to fire him 6 weeks later. Bobby Lee got the Army of Northern Virginia across the Potomac on the night of September 18th, and one night. His cavalry, his artillery, his entire infantry. Guess how long it took General McClellan 6 weeks later? 8 days.
That's why Lincoln said McClellan's got the slow moves.
No, the more I study General McClellan, the more I despise him.
And he never had enough troops. If he had 50,000, he
Didn't matter.
needed
I need more.
100,000. I need more troops. I need more troops.
His
No.
men loved him.
In
Little
his,
Mac.
in his defense, Pinkerton was feeding him faulty information. Pinkerton was his chief of security. The Pinkerton agency today, hopefully they've gotten better. Pinkerton always had twice the number of enemy troops, and people that were in the know of what the Confederate resources were, there's no way they can have that many troops. They just don't have that kind of manpower and those resources. But McClellan was a moral coward. And the sad thing with the Army of the Potomac, he had honed a magnificent instrument and was incapable of using it and incapable of appreciating the mettle of his men.
He was the worst guy that could ever happen because he ran against Lincoln, the presidency.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of people say, well,
That's something else too.
McClellan was a Democrat. Democrats came in 2 flavors during the war. There were peace Democrats that were known as Copperheads, and there were war Democrats that believed in prosecuting the war. But amongst the war Democrats, a lot of them wanted a gentleman's war, didn't really want to fight to draw blood to finish the enemy. And McClellan, unfortunately, not only was a moral coward, he completely lacked a killer instinct. And I think part of it, he was just really wasn't serious about destroying Bobby Lee's army. So,
Sounds like Vietnam.
well, never should have gone there and lost a lot of friends there. It was an ugly damn war. Screwed up a lot of guys because they did what armies of occupation do when they're frustrated. They kill civilians. Gentlemen, it's been a
Appreciate
pleasure.
it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're
Great
good.
training.
Come on, come on. Now shake. Pleasure.
Nice seeing you.
Yep,
That's great.
yep.
We'll keep in touch with you. I got
Okay.
you. I got
You
your
got my
ink.
card.
I got your.
And I'm on a mission to set the
You're doing
record.